Something that I found interesting is there was a period, as you've just mentioned last year, when Harry came over here and we were hearing a lot about sort of what was going on with their relationship. He was by his father's side and he said that he wasn't able to catch up with him in May. But there's been, after the BBC interview, a period of relative quiet in terms of where their relationship was at. Why do you think now, very much now, we're hearing so much about it?
I think it's...
Where's it coming from is, I guess, what I'm asking.
So that BBC interview was a huge moment and, Harry clearly experienced restraint collapse, basically. He'd clearly gone in. I'm sure that they had that interview booked in the diary before they knew the outcome of the case. And Harry probably imagined that he was going to go in there and give this plea for reconciliation with his family. Then he saw he'd lost the case and just was furious about it, and so he started, giving these swipes at Charles in the middle of this interview that was supposed to be calling for reconciliation. And so I thought that had a huge potential to blow any chance that he had, but it is promising to see these new meetings taking place. I think the reason behind it, though, is fundamentally because Harry had a clear out, and Meghan had a clear out of their PR team on both sides of the Atlantic. They brought new people in who have come with new energy and a real determination to move the dial in terms of public opinion, move the dial in terms of media coverage of the Sussexes, and that comes with it, move the dial in terms of the relationship with the palace.
And so we know what's happened so far. We know that the meetings happened. We've had this report about the diary being shared. What do you expect may happen with this situation now down the line in terms of Harry coming here, him having face-to-face possibly with the King?
I think he's trying to get reconciliation before the King goes. I mean, he did obviously say in that BBC interview, I don't know how much longer my father has left, and obviously dropped a bunch more bombshells in that interview. It wasn't that long ago, so it's kind of crazy now that they're trying to share diary slots and trying to figure out how he can kind of get back in with the royal fold, because Queen Elizabeth II did say, you can't have it both ways. You can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out royals. I don't want that. And I think that this is really betraying what she wanted for them. They need to choose. I just don't agree with this hybrid situation. They're like typical millennial royals who want to do gig economy jobs in the royal family or something. I don't exactly know what their whole plan is. It's a very confused strategy. And I do agree that they've got a better team who's clearly trying to fashion something out of this. But I just think it's a very confused, dilapidated thing, and I don't see it going anywhere.
After months of icy silence, whispers of peace talks between Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the royal family have resurfaced. But what's the real motive behind this sudden call for reconciliation? Tonight, we uncover why these so-called peace plans may already be doomed. Reports claim Harry reached out to King Charles, suggesting a quiet conversation, a royal reset. Yet insiders say this wasn't a move of love or loyalty, it was strategy. A calculated attempt to soften their image ahead of a global tour and new media deals. Behind the smiles, tension brews in Montecito. Meghan, ever the brand architect, allegedly views reconciliation as a PR opportunity. Harry, meanwhile, remains torn, a prince desperate for belonging, yet trapped in a world that profits from royal rebellion. It's a confused partnership, 1 foot in Hollywood, 1 foot in Windsor, and neither firmly grounded. Inside Buckingham Palace, reaction to the supposed peace talks was cautious. Senior aides believe the Sussexes' intentions are far from sincere. After years of accusations and interviews, trust has been shattered and the King's patience nearly gone. Any truce would have to serve the monarchy first, not Meghan's next project. Across the UK, public opinion is skeptical. Polls show that many Britons view the couple's outreach as damage control, not heartfelt apology. In America, however, Meghan's supporters hail it as a new chapter. The divide between the two nations and the two images of the Sussexes has never been clearer. Royal commentators argue that peace without accountability is pointless. Harry and Meghan's strategy, part rebrand, part redemption, ignores the fundamental truth. The institution they wounded is not a Hollywood script that can be rewritten overnight. Without humility, sincerity, and consistency, these peace talks are nothing more than performance. The Sussexes may crave forgiveness, but the royal family demands respect. And until that balance is restored, peace will remain just another headline. This is Royal Saga, where truth, image, and royalty collide.
Can't really mention Harry without Meghan. So there's an interesting claim about her time in the royal family, which has resurfaced from Valentine Lowe's royal biography, Courtiers. Now, we've had him on the show here. He's a wonderful source. And he alleged in it that Meghan had left a, quote, trail of evidence behind so that when the time came for Harry and Meghan to leave, she'd be able to say, look how they failed to support me. I want to ask, what do you make of this claim?
I'm sure she did. I think in some ways it's a rational thing to do. And, you know, I think a lot of people would have done exactly that. I think the problem is not necessarily with Meghan doing that. The problem is actually with the way that Harry and Meghan kind of piled in quite relentlessly on the royals. And particularly, like, I do think that even the Oprah interview, they did botch it. Like, certain aspects of it were botched. And, you know, could have been done differently and better in a way that would be less toxic and destructive. For example, you know, the racism allegation, you know, they have clearly kind of tried to change it retrospectively or row it back. So obviously they botched, you know, Meghan botched how she described that story. So I'm not, you know, like, it's so insanely intense being a royal, like, for all of them, including William, including Kate. I actually don't think that it's a problem to be trying to collect these little bits and pieces as a safeguard to protect yourself. The problem is not the operation to protect herself. The problem is the operation to try to destroy everybody else, which didn't come out for several years. But, you know, there's always been this thing that Meghan's kind of intimated that she's got receipts. That was, you know, in the days after Oprah, one of her friends went on ITV and said, you know, we've got the receipts to prove everything. There was also a point where she was giving an interview and she said, you know, I've never signed anything, so I can say whatever I want. So she's always had this tendency to give these kind of slightly veiled threats that she's sitting on this bombshell. There's one point, I think they suggested they'd found the diary, you know, their diaries that they kept during these periods. So they've always had, like, been floating these ideas that they're sitting on a kind of a massive nuclear warhead that they can drop at any point. But ultimately, actually, they destroyed themselves by the way that they just basically relentlessly attacked Harry's own family in a context when no one was fighting back. And so even they may well still be sitting on unused material that Harry says he'll never share. But it kind of doesn't matter anymore, because even if they did, they're so uniformly viewed as the villains, particularly in Britain. But even in America, they're not viewed in this protective way anymore. So even if they are sitting on some unexploded bombs, I don't actually think that the royals need to be too scared of it.
Well, this story hasn't been confirmed. That allegation hasn't been confirmed by either side, of course, I should say. If it were true that she had, you know, let's take away the cynical aspect just for argument's sake then and say that she was safeguarding it. If it were true, has it been an effective strategy for her to collect that information? Did the quote that Valentine Lowe used was hijack the narrative as it turned against her? Do you think that that was effective?
She turned the narrative against herself. I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, I think she probably thought she was safeguarding herself. She probably thought she was collecting all these pebbles of information that she could then fling at the royal family once she exited. But I think actually the bombshell is the bullying allegations and the investigation that is still withheld by the royal family that went into Meghan when she lived at Kensington Palace, and what she has done to the staff. I mean, there were reports that she reduced people to tears. And I just think that stuff that the palace is actually protecting Meghan from. And I think it's really the other way around. I think the palace was a victim of her, not she a victim of the palace. And I think they've used every single bit of information that they can and monetized it and sold it to Netflix and wrote a book and did a podcast. And I don't think there's anything else left. I really don't think there is.
I've said that so many times along the way, though. And I have been wrong. I have been wrong. Very wrong.
Please. I mean, I can't. I can't take it.
You do, like, make a really interesting point, which is that actually with the bullying allegations, in a way, the palace did exactly the same thing, because Jason did what any civil servant worth their salt knows to do, which is to, if you have concerns, put them down on record. And that's what he did. But, you know, the allegations that Meghan was bullying her staff had been around for a while by the time that he wrote that now famous email to Simon Case, William's private secretary, saying that Meghan had bullied 2 PAs out of the royal household. And he basically puts down his concerns on record and then resigned because he couldn't cope with it anymore. And it's very clear what he's doing because 1,000 civil servants have done the same thing in different contexts. But it is rational and it is logical. But like you say, the way actually that it destroyed Meghan and Harry's reputations is actually not the fact that the allegation was made, but the fact that they didn't mention it to Oprah. So they went out and they gave this whole interview to Oprah, and they said, Harry said, my family really welcomed Meghan, and then everything changed after they saw how brilliant she was at the job. And that just isn't true, because we know that this massive argument was happening about whether Meghan was bullying the staff, and that was real. And so the fact that they didn't say it to Oprah ultimately was what was so undermining.